It's my final blog post of the year. I've got loads to get through, so I'm going to crack on. First up, we have The Great War by Joe Sacco. Joe Sacco is a fantastic graphic artist, and in the past he's looked at different war zones like Sarajevo and Palestine, places like that. He's now turned his eye to the past, and he has illustrated the first day of the Battle of the Somme. This is not a book, it is an illustrated panorama. Very hard for me to demonstrate this, obviously, but as you can see, it is something that folds out into 24 feet of illustrated panorama to show exactly what happened on that first day of the Battle of the Somme. 20,000 British soldiers were killed on one day's fighting and 40,000 were injured. It's an extraordinary document, and it has the kind of detail in it that means that you can read it for hours, put it back on the shelf, come back to it the next day and still see loads of things that you didn't see. If you're into graphic work, you're going to want this on your Christmas list. It's the kind of thing you're going to want to have on your shelf and to take down and look at again and again and again. Obviously, because of working on Warhorse, it has a particular interest. I took it in there, and obviously on the stage we were able to open the whole thing out and have a really good look at it. There is so much in there, and it is accompanied by this booklet, which is an essay by Adam Hochschild about that first day, and it also has a sort of annotation of the panorama itself to show exactly what's going on various panels. A fantastic production by Jonathan Cape, and as I say, well worth putting on your Christmas list if you're into that kind of thing. Another graphic work, Room for Love by Ilya, which is published by Self-Made Hero. I don't read a lot of what I would call comics, the kind of things that have pictures of women with pneumatic breasts and men with rippling muscles and taking place on weird planets. It's not a snobbish thing, I just don't have a particular interest in it. I'm far more interested in what I would call graphic novels or graphic fiction, and this is a good example of it because here we have two people. Leonie Hart, who is a 40-something romantic novelist who's got writer's block. She can't write about romance anymore because there is so little of it in her own life. And behind her is a teenager from Ireland who's called Cougar. He's sort of like a street kid. He's homeless, living on the streets. And the two of them form an unlikely partnership. It does involve sex, but it's not really about sex. It involves something like love, something that allows the two of them to learn something from each other and to be changed by that relationship and to move on with their lives with something about them changed. And the reason why I was talking about pneumatic breasts earlier is because, as you can see from the back cover, these are two people who are tired, depressed, ill, and it's fascinating to see that kind of physicality represented in graphic work, and a very interesting take on relationships with such a mismatched couple. Self-Made Hero publish a lot of original graphic fiction, and it generally does tend to be very original, so they are definitely worth keeping an eye on if that's your kind of thing. Now we move on to my Kindle. Yes, I'm all teched up, it's 2013 and I can read books on something like this. I'm still not in love with the thing, but I'm glad that I do use it because it has allowed me to read what I will call my book of the year. I'm not going to do a big books of the year roundup, but A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Eimear McBride and published by Galley-Beggar Press is extraordinary. It is totally separated from the rest of the books I've read this year, partly because of the way that it's written. Eimear McBride writes with this extraordinary prose, which is not quite stream of consciousness, but something like that. It has something of Beckett about it. It has something of Joyce about it. It is not even quite prose. It's almost poetic. It's extraordinary. It's broken up. It's fractured. It is broken, and that is because it tells the story of a girl and her brain-damaged brother, and other members of her family. It is about her growing up, about her childhood, about her sexual awakening, and about her very difficult and dark and twisted and painful life. It's not an easy read, not just because of the subject matter, but because the structure of the prose demands an awful lot of the reader. It's the kind of book that you may well love or hate. You may well love and hate it. It's hard work. But I found that because of the investment I had made as I was reading it, it builds and builds and builds in power until it really is, towards the end, just completely overwhelming. That's why it's my book of the year, because it moved me more than anything else. It reminded me in that way of If Nobody Speaks of Remarkable Things by John McGregor, another book that people either loved or hated and had a very specific prose style. It shares with that book that sort of build-up of momentum, as you really tune your ear in, there is something about the way that prose is written which is just amazing. It steamrollers your emotions, and it would be so easy to get it wrong. That's why I believe she is a fantastic writer. She has won the inaugural Goldsmiths Prize, and in fact, I think if you go on their website, you might be able to hear her reading it, which would be far better than me trying to read it, because it just would be, trust me. Anyway, book of the year by far. Also on my Kindle was Black Vodka, which is 10 stories written by Deborah Levy. She wrote Swimming Home, which was nominated for the Booker a while back, and was a book that I loved. I was fascinated to read these stories. I probably need to read them again to really get the meat off the bones, but the problem I find with Kindle is, especially with short stories, it's very easy just to kind of whip through. So what I can say about them is that they have that same kind of unsettling feeling that Swimming Home had. It is a disconcerting read at times. There's some really interesting stuff in there, lots of stuff about identity and loneliness and disconnection, and there's a very European feel. These stories seem to be set all over the place in Europe, so it makes it a very different read for me personally, and I will always be wanting to read what Deborah Levy writes, so bring more. Finally, we have this novella, I will call it, Emile in Winter by Hubert Mignarelli, published by Portobello Books. It describes itself on the back as a miniature masterpiece. It is one of those novellas which is just perfect. You know, it's a short story, wonderfully told. You can read it in one sitting, and it leaves you feeling very, very well nourished, I was going to say, which is probably the least appropriate thing to say about this book, because it is about 3 guards in a concentration camp who go out on a patrol, who find a Jewish man hiding in the woods, and who have to spend an evening with him in a sort of hunter's cottage that they find, where they try to heat themselves up and feed themselves. You get a sense, and this is why it's a great time of year to be reading a book like this, when the nights are drawing in, when it's cold outside. You get a sense in this book, more than anything I've read recently, of how cold these people are, how hungry they are, how desperate their existence is on a daily level, and how much suffering there is, both for the guards and for the prisoners, of course. And that's what makes it an interesting read, because it shows both sides of those things. In fact, you're involved with the guards more than anybody else. And the question, as you reach the end of the book, is, after that interaction with this Jewish man, are they going to be able to do what they're supposed to do, which is to take him back to the camp where they know he will be killed, but they know that if they bring him back, they will be able to go out on patrol again the next day. They won't have to be the ones in the camp killing people. They can be out there having a sense of freedom. They feel as much imprisoned as the people within that concentration camp at times. Really, really fascinating. One of those books that contains so much in a very, very small space. And so if miniature masterpiece is what they would like to call it, I'm not going to disagree. Finally, a quick mention for something which is going to be coming out next year. This is Polina by Bastien Vive. He wrote A Taste of Chlorine, a graphic novel which I absolutely loved a couple of years ago, and this is his follow-up. The reason why I loved A Taste of Chlorine is because he has an amazing ability as an artist to capture movement and gesture and the human body within his artwork, and therefore the teaming up of that skill with a story about this young girl, Polina, and her training as a ballet dancer and her career as a dancer sounds like a pretty good match up to me. I will give it a proper review at the beginning of next year, but just to flag that up for you. That's it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I'll see you in 2014. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.